through the FISA process. And so we wanted to provide a clear picture. Ours bolsters the credibility of the FBI.
Joining us now, Sagar Enjeti, White House correspondent for the Daily Caller. All right, so the House Intelligence Committee voted unanimously to release this Democrat memo. What happens now?
Right, so the White House has exactly 5 days in order to do a national security classification of this memo. And it's important to understand that this memo is substantially longer than the Republican counterpart. It's about 10 pages. And so also what we're hearing is that this memo it has a lot more national considerations, national security considerations that the FBI is going to have to take a long look at in terms of sources and methods and many of the other things that they are allowed to object to whenever it comes to declassification. It's also important to remember, though, that if Mr. Schiff and the Democrats feel that this memo was, quote, politically redacted, then they do have the power to bring this to a closed-door session of the House in order to vote that memo out and in order to override the president's declassification authority.
But why would Democrats want to do that? I mean, one of their complaints about the then imminent release of the Republican version of, well, the Republican memo, is that it was going to reveal sources and methods. If you're saying that your understanding is that this one goes into even more depth, why?
Well, I think that John Roberts hit it right on the head before me, which is the fact that the Democrats are very eager to have the president have to make some redactions here so that they can claim that there is a political motivation behind these. The fact of the matter is that, you know, if we look back at the Republican memo, we heard so much about sources and methods, et cetera, et cetera. There was absolutely no national security implications to a fully unredacted version of the memo. And so there is quite a bit of political theater that goes into this. And we also have to understand this memo was constructed as a rebuttal to that of the Republicans. It was constructed specifically as a political document in order to have a rebuttal version to quote unquote give context. But it's also interesting here that much of the context goes into the minutia of, you know, particular footnotes on whether the FISA application did in fact disclose that it was a political document or whether the FBI disclosed that. Yeah.
Because that's one of the big questions here. The Republican memo says that the FISA judge or judges was not told that the dossier was politically motivated, was paid for by the Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee. Now, it's our understanding that the Democrats are going to say, oh, but the judge could have read between the lines and he would have figured that out quite easily.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, we have no idea how long this FISA application is because it hasn't been released. As I understand it, these things can run into several hundred pages. So the idea that the FBI did not mention that to the judge, but included a mere footnote in a several hundred-page document and expected that to be, you know, disclosure to the court. Now, perhaps in the letter of the law that's technically true, but in terms of the political ramifications of this FISA application on an American citizen using politically motivated opposition research, it does raise some questions here.
What about the fact that Glenn Simpson of Fusion GPS was meeting with Bruce Orr, a top Justice Department official and a guy whose wife worked for Glenn Simpson?
Right, exactly. And that's one thing that we never hear about in the Democratic rebuttal memo, and that's simply because there doesn't seem to be much rebuttal here. Bruce Orr met with Glenn Simpson before the investigation in the FISA application on Carter Page. After the investigation, he had a relationship with Christopher Steele. He had a meeting with Christopher Steele. Glenn Simpson, the man who, you know, helped compile this memo with Christopher Steele, employed Mr. Orr's wife. Now, what sources close to Orr's wife have said is that she was not involved in this investigation whatsoever, or the dossier's composition. But, you know, some of us have a few more questions for Mrs. Orr on that subject.
Yeah, because she was considered a Russia expert and in a fairly small firm. Kind of interesting. All right, Sagar, thanks very much. Sagar Enjeti from the...
Thanks for having me, John.
You bet. Thank you. Daily Caller.
What a wild ride it was on Wall Street. The Dow taking a record-setting